Okay, so we're going to talk about rangelands and drylands. These are ecosystems that are very, very special. They support billions of people and their livelihoods around the world. They're very complicated, very challenging ecosystems, and require a different governance and management system to forests or crop lands. Like many of the ecosystems that you've heard about today, they are being degraded, and there are big challenges. There's an urgent need for investment in these ecosystems, and we will hear today some of the ways that you can do this.
Hello, I'm Daisy Hessenberger from the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. For large-scale restoration of drylands and rangelands, a key starting point is where rangelands are and what their status is. So I have a question for all of you. How much of the world's mass is covered by rangelands? Someone said 40%. I have 40% over here. Do I have another percentage somewhere else? Right there in the back. 30? 40% again. Okay, that's 2 votes for 40. There was supposed to be a question on the screen. 50. I have 50. Going once, going twice? 25, 65. Actually, all of you are sort of unfortunately right, because the answer is we do not know. There is such poor info on rangelands and drylands. Estimations run from 18% to 80% of the world's landmass. We need significant investment into collecting and consolidating data on rangelands and drylands to address our SDGs, to achieve land degradation neutrality, to promote economic development and rangeland biodiversity. The decade of ecosystem restoration must address the need for data of these ecosystems. Okay, but let's move beyond the figures on a journey to different parts of the world where you will catch just a small glimpse into the lives of pastoralists and other local rangeland and dryland users. We will hear about experiences from Mongolia, Cameroon, and Mexico. We'll hear of their challenges, how they use their land, and how they are developing new innovations to harness change. Looking good behind me. On this note, I invite His Excellency, Mr. Sukhold Suki, the permanent representative and ambassador to the UN for Mongolia, to introduce you to the very first of our journeys.
And unfortunately, Mr. Sukhold had to leave because of the delay in the program. So we have his advisor, Mrs. Geroldsek, to make the introduction.
Hello, everyone. I'm representing of Mongolia in New York, and I'm happy, very glad to participate today's, especially this session. The rangelands and drylands predominate Mongolia's landscape, shaping the livelihoods and culture of our people who have grown to adapt and depend upon these environments mainly through pastoralism. As of 2017, 1/3 of our national labor force was employed in pastoral agriculture, with the sector contributing close to 10% of the country's export and a quarter of its GDP. Within the agriculture sector, more than 80% of total production comes from the traditional pastoral livestock sector. This consists of more than 66 million heads of livestock grazing across nearly 3/4 of the Mongolia's territory. That's why we are calling for a UN-designated International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. Keeping our rangelands healthy is critical for supporting the valuable services this ecosystem provides, from nutrient cycling, oxygen production to biological diversity and soil formation. This film takes you to the heart of Mongolia's rangelands, showing the challenges faced and what can be done to overcome them. Thank you very much.
жылдар енді қазақша айтқанда 6 ата 7 атадан бері қарай мекендеп келеміз. Ал қамтылық болғанда серіктестік деп айтамыз. Сол жаңағы бір қауым, бір серік ұйым осы жерде бірігіп пайдаланамыз. Бұрыннан бір қамтылық дегеніміз енді бізде тегінен бұл осы өлкедегі адамдар қауымдасып отырады, шараласып. Мына негізінен біздің моңғол елі тарихтан көшпенділер халқы деп айтады, көшпенді елдер. Бұл малды табиғи жайылыммен пайдаланып, сол табиғи жайылымды жаңағы қауым отырған ауыл. Жаңағы сол серіктестіктер дұрыс жайылым өздері шешіп пайдаланады. Ал енді ол еңбектеніп отырған жаңағы малдың аса мән беру керек болды бізде. Жаңағы сүтті бір жерден құйып, қаймақ, әр түрлі өнімдер алатын бір біріккен тәртіппен бір кемже дейміз енді бізде болғанда, тас. Соған тарылтып ұстауымыз керек. Қазір мен енді 5 жасымнан берген толық. Бұл нәрсені қарағанда табиғатта тұрақтылық жоқ. Сол себептен болар. Бұл тұрақсыз. Бұрын болғанда бір ай, бір қалыпты табиғат қалпын сақтап тұратын. Қазір 2 күнде, 3 күнде тұтқиыл суық болып, тұтқиыл жылы болып, ауа райы тұрақсыздап тұр. Сапасына келсек, бізде мына жауын мол болса, қар мол болса, неғұрлым жаңағы жер тамырланады, шөптің түрі де молайып. Ал жауын тартық, қар тартық болған жағдайда, ал енді ары қарай малдың сапасына жаңа келетін болсақ, дұрыс пайдалану керек. 4 мезгілде дұрыс пайдаланып, қыстауына, жайлауына, күзеуіне, мал қоздататын жеріне. Сол өлке көктесе, сол өлкеге жайылту керек, көктемесе басқа жерге отар арқылы. Дәл өзінің бөлісіменен біріккен тәртіппен жаңағы қауымдастық. Барлығы бірігіп шешіп. Халық шешсе, сол жердің табиғатын білет, шөбінің шүйгіндігін білет, суының тұнықтығын білет, қай кезде қалай пайдаланса деген, сол құқықты халыққа толығынан берсе деген. Заң жүзінде келгенде жердің құқын біріккен тәртіппен иемденсін деген ол жарап жатыр. Тұрақ тұрғылықты халыққа жалпы билігін өз шешетін дейді. Әкімшіліктен болса, бұл үкіметтен заң шығып, үкімет басы аймақ әкімі сұмын көрсетіліп, бізге қолдау беріліп тұр. Ең басты мәселе біздің осы туып өскен тұнық ауамыз таза болу керек, денсаулықта мәселе. Ең бірінші таза ауаны сақтауымыз керек біз ластықтан. Ауа таза болса, адамның денсаулығы зор болады. Үшінші мәселе, ұрпақтар осы өлкеге сақтай алатындай білім жинау керек. Сол табиғат жағын жақсы оқу керек. Осы табиғатын, елін сақтайтын сол жағынан көп білім жинау керек өзіне. Өте қажетті білімді оқу керек деп өзім солай ойлаймын негізінен.
So for our second film, we will go to Cameroon, and I'd like to invite Mr. Umaru Sule, who's an Mbororo pastoralist, now living in Philadelphia, but still very much a pastoralist at heart, to introduce the next film.
Thank you very much. My name is Umaru Sule. I am from the Mbororo tribe in Cameroon, which is an ethnic group which is pastoralists. And pastoralists, what does that mean as far as we are concerned? Pastoralists means cattle, it means land, it means water, it means vegetation, forages, and actually the health of the environment. Anything that is taken out, it does affect us socially and economically. So as people who are attached to the land, we collaborate with the land. So with the pressures of today, we have challenges like everywhere. Pasture, for example, the traditional pasture is disappearing fast. And in order not to lose our livelihood, we are taking the bull by the horn, which is improving pastures. So in this aspect, we are looking way to reduce transhumance, which is taking the cattle from one area to another, particularly in the dry season. So pasture improvement is one way, and it also helps us economically to settle and also make the cattle healthier.
Okay, here we are at the Pasture Improvement plot financed by Boskuda for the grazing community of Santa Akum. This plot belongs to the young man in whose compound we visited now, Saidu Umaru. He has a land certificate, so that gives it an authenticity that we will not have even problem from somebody coming in to say, oh, you've occupied my land, and they bring us problem. So the land was clean, certificated. Now, behind this fence, down, are 2 hectares. From down there, right up to there, the fence surrounding the place. That's where we had were given by Saidu Umaru for the community pasture improvement plot. We choose here because at least it is a bit flat. So we hired a tractor from Santa, the Ministry of Agriculture, which came and plowed the place, harrowed it before we did plant the bracharia seed. Because this seed, which we planted inside here, is bracharia. It's a very nutritious plant, good for cattle, fattening and both for milk production. Paddocking is important also. If you paddock and control the movement of cattle in and out, you will not have a problem about what cattle should eat. And inside, we looked through, we saw that there are other species of grasses that have grown up. You understand? Which are all used by cattle. So, if you look where I am standing here, you see that this grass, the level is not up to 10 centimeters. It's just about 10 centimeters high. Why? Compared to that place which is more than about 50 centimeters high. Here there is overgrazing. cattle, horses, and sheep. You see, they pull it. And not only his cattle that come from about 3-4 kilometers away come and graze here and go back by night. Horses come from different areas, come and graze here and go. The same thing with sheep. But inside this fence now, only cattle that are controlled, if he decides to open the fence before cattle can enter. So we are talking now, pasture improvement and paddocking. These things go hand in hand. If you practice paddocking, you control the movement. You will not allow foreign cattle to just come and graze in your land like that, etc. Although it is our tradition. When you try to improve, you fence him, the other neighbors will be angry that this man is blocking the land, blocking cattle movement and all the like. They don't want to see somebody develop. But I think sometimes you have to be radical also. Take your stand, develop. Others will imitate after. Let them follow.
So for our final film, is that working? For our final film, we will go to Mexico, and I ask Gabriel Segueso to introduce that film. Gabriel is the coordinator of the Semi-Arid Platform of Latin America and the director of Fundapaz in Argentina.
Thank you. I speak in Spanish for translation. Thank you.
It's an honor for me on behalf of Fundapaz, which is an organization that works in Argentina with rural population, indigenous population, and on behalf of the Semi-Arid Platform of Latin America. Latin America is an initiative of the Rangelands initiative. It's a pleasure for me to introduce this video. This is something that's happening in Mexico. We work on different issues like access to water, land, resource management. And one of the central issues that we have in the semi-arid regions of Latin America is production in areas that implies the restoration of many pasture areas that have been degraded so that the millions of people who live off these systems in Latin America can have access to a better life, can come out of the poverty, the marginalization under which many of these producers, these farmers live. This system in Mexico, this is a mid-sized farmer in Mexico who needs to restore its system, replanting its pastures, so not only it becomes profitable, but there is a better biodiversity, and the biodiversity also of the birds that go together with this production system. So I wanted to show a model of a productive conversion where which has as its center the restoration of the pasture so that it can positively affect the living conditions of millions of people in Latin America. The farmer here talks about being constantly critical of what you're doing and being flexible in order to introduce changes in the production system so that they become more resilient and more sustainable. Chihuahua, Mexico. I work with cattle. I'm not working. I just enjoy living here. To me, it doesn't mean coming to work, and I don't get tired. I can be here all the time. I'm happier here than anywhere else. When I started working here, there was less grass and much less cattle. I realized that I was destroying an ecosystem. If we continued this way, we would have ended up selling the ranch or being broke. That's when we hit bottom. Why do we have less cattle than we used to have? Why aren't we as profitable as we used to be? Because before we exploited the natural resources well, but not in a sustainable way. I believe the only way to become more profitable is by managing pastures in a sustainable way. When you're selling cows, you're selling your pasture. I don't live off the cattle. I live off the production of grass, of pastures, which we do from the earth. It's the productivity of the pasture, of the ecosystem. The pasture is the most important part. If we don't have the grassland, the pasture, well, cows do not grow. So the basic thing is not to overgraze, because when it rains, it doesn't rain grass. A lot of people forget that. If on soil that has been mistreated, that have been degraded, that's done, basically grass is not going to grow even if it rains. A ranch is a business that you have to manage as a whole. This includes birds, snakes, all the microorganisms in the soil, the grass, and the cattle. We have to manage it all as a whole in order to improve it. All the fauna that you see here show that you have good pastures. For 20 years, this type of falcon has been like a thermometer, something that indicates the condition of the soil. And I think it's a very significant sign that we're doing things well somehow. The more variety you have in your wildlife there, the healthier your ranch, your ecosystem is. That means you're doing things well. One of the biggest challenges is changing the way we think. That is the paradigms that we grew up with on how cattle should be bred. And if we do not change our attitude towards nature, if we keep seeing it the same way we used to instead of seeing it as a whole, we can't change. So first, we need to change ourselves in order to manage the ecosystem. From the start, we said, well, how are we going to do this in a sustainable way? First, the cattle was spread all over the ranch. We started to round up the cattle. We started to change it, to rotate it, to give the pasture more rest time, so it would be healthy and it would be sustainable. It's not the number of animals that you have on the pasture. What damages it is the time that the animals spend on the pasture. The less time they spend there, the more efficient it becomes. If anybody is interested in our grazing system, that would be the main advice. Do not overgraze. Do not degrade the pasture. Well, the times are changing. There's an easier way to do things. So we have to do what's new. And the numbers speak for themselves. They don't lie. The pasture, the cover in our ranch has increased from 60 to 80% from the grass we had before. It looks healthy, and we have stopped the desertification, the degradation of the soil. Once you understand the way you need to do it and you see the results, it's worthwhile. It gives us great satisfaction. It's costly not to know. Ignorance is costly. Not knowing how to work with nature is costly. People prefer to fail conventionally instead of succeeding unconventionally. We're not just saying this, we're showing this with facts. And this is what's going to change people's minds. With words, it won't happen. But people can change. I changed. You look at yourself in the mirror and you say, well, I am responsible for what happens in the ranch. It's hard to admit that, but that's it. As long as we don't recognize that we're responsible for what happens, we cannot have that constructive self-criticism and then say, well, let's go in this direction. If I can say so, every time I mount a horse, I put my feet on the stirrups, I feel like the king of the mountain. Living with nature gives us life. That's what I feel. It's very satisfying for a human being to go back to nature, to live with nature, to feel it as it is. It's a great satisfaction.
I'd like to call on Mrs. Paola Agostini from the World Bank to make some concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I would like to say that today is a very, very happy day for me because finally the rangeland had made it into a big, important panel at the Global Landscape Forum. I have been with the Global Landscape Forum for many years. We always talk about forest and a lot less about rangeland. So a particular thank you to Hilary and to Fiona for really bringing the rangeland to the forefront. I would like to leave you with 3 key messages after we have seen this fantastic movie, journey from Mongolia to Cameroon to Mexico. First of all, that rangeland management and working on rangeland is good both to alleviate poverty, but also to increase shared prosperity. The second message is that rangeland management is not only good for the environment and is not only good for agriculture. I just came back from Kazakhstan, where the World Bank is investing in a very big project of $500 million together with a small GF grant on rangeland and agroforestry. And it's becoming very clear that we are receiving a lot of requests, even from Ministry of Transport, in saying, why don't you come and work with us on rangeland management, because we have roads that are completely damaged during the difficult, of a difficult weather. Why don't you come and plant some trees along our roads so that those are good for your animals, are good for the environment, but are good for our roads? Or we have a lot of cities, they were telling us in Kazakhstan, a lot of small cities that were completely covered with dust in a lot of times of the rain. Can you please help us manage our rangeland and add some belts around the cities?
Peatland management and conservation in practice.
Thank you, exactly. Not peatland, but rangeland management.
Prior to our operation.
The last point is that, as I was saying, we can do this at scale. We have now really, even inside the World Bank, really ramping up our work in rangeland management. We just launched this publication at the UNCCD COP on sustainable rangeland management in Africa, but it's a book done together with Terra Africa and WOCAT. We are going to do one for Central Asia. And so we are really ready to work more on rangeland using really we are at the Landscape Forum, a landscape approach. You cannot divide the forest from the rangeland from the agricultural land. We are trying to manage it all together in order to maximize ecosystem services and livelihood. The last 2 points are one on partnership. We cannot do this without partnership. Partnership like the Global Landscape Forum or ECA 30 that was just launched last week, Africa 100, LAC 20 by 20, or ProGreen that the World Bank just launched a couple of days ago, like my colleague Benoit said, are fundamental to really moving moving ahead with this important agenda. And the last point I want to leave you is we have been hearing all through the day that we as individuals need to commit. We have been all thinking about our soul and our, that we can do it. And so my message to you is that shall we have sort of a moral imperative that each one of us should not end the year feeling well if they didn't plant at least one tree, either with your hands or through these apps that the young people are telling us that we can also do through the apps. But you cannot conclude your year without having done that. Thank you very much.